Hey everybody, what's up? In today's video, we're going to work with classes and objects in Java. So first of all, here is my main part of my main function, let's say. So this is my main function, and this is my class that I am defining here, okay? So the name of my class is person, and this class called person has two attributes. One of them is called name, the other one is called age. Name is of string data type, while age is of integer data type. Okay, so this is the initialization of my person class in Java. Now in the main function down there here, basically I would like to create an instance of this person class that I have there. Okay, so now in order to create an instance, or let's say to create an object of that class, I write down the name of the class, and then I write down the name of the instance, or let's say the name of the object. Okay, and on the right hand side I write that new person, again the name of the class, and parentheses. This way I am initializing an instance from the person class, or an object from the person class. Now I would like to assign some values to the attributes of the person class using this object. Okay, so I write down the name of my object, then dot the name of the attribute, which is name. So p.name and p.age. Okay, these are two attributes if you remember. And on the right hand side, I'm assigning some values to them. So for the p.name, I'm having Alice, and then p.age, I'm having 25. Now in the output, I would like to print this message. I would like to write down Alice is 25 years old. For calling the name Alice, I simply use the object p.name, and then we are having the is, and then p.age for the age of Alice, and then years old message in the code, and is also is in the code. So when I run this code, I see Alice is 25 years old in the output. So this is basically how I have one class. I have an object of that class. I assign some values to the attributes of that class using the objects, and then I have them in the output. So if I want to have another object of the same class, so I write down person p2 equals new person, and that's it. This is the new object. So p2.name, I can say, for example, Reza. p2.age, I can say 35, for example. So this is now the new object that I created, p2, and I have the name as Reza, I have 35 as the age. So two attributes of the person class are assigned two values using the second object. Okay, so now if I want to have the same thing being printed in the output, I copy paste, and this time I write down p2.name and p2.age. Okay, so now I run the code one more time, and apart from the first message, I see the second message in the output as well. So we see Reza is 35 years old. So we see that here in the output, we could have the prints, and we can have multiple instances or objects from a class. It depends on us. So in this video, we learned how to create and declare a class in Java, how to create an instance of that class, and how to assign some values to the attributes of that class using the objects. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, welcome to this video. In today's video, we're going to talk about constructors in Java. So here I have a class named car, and there are two attributes for this car class. One of the attributes is called model, and the other one is called year. And the first one is of a string data type, the second one is of integer data type. Okay, Now I have a constructor that is a default version that we're creating here. So I have a constructor that is named car. So the sign that we can understand if we are having a constructor or not is to check the name. So if there is a name inside the class that has the same name as the class, it means that that part is the constructor. So here I have the constructor and it starts with the name of the class car. So the name of the class is car. And when we are having a constructor, we must have the same name. Therefore, this is the constructor. This is the sign to understand we are dealing with constructors or not. So this is car, which is the name of the class. Therefore, this part is the constructor part. And the default version is that we are assigning the unknown string to the model attribute of the car class and the number 0 to the year attribute of the car class. Okay, if you remember, we were having two attributes, year and model, and this constructor is assigning these two values to these two attributes. In fact, when we are having constructors, it means that we would like to assign certain values to the attributes of the class. Okay, so this is the default constructor that we can have here, but we can also have a definition of a parameterized constructor in our class, meaning that we are having the car again. However, we need two parameters here. So we need a string and we need an integer. So the string is m and the integer is y. So when we are building the construct, when we are creating an instance of this car class, we need to have the declaration of two parameters, the one string and one integer. And these two are going to be assigned to the attributes of the class. This may sound a little bit abstract now. I'll give you an example in a few minutes. And finally, we are having a function inside our class, and it's a void type, meaning that it is not going to return any value. It is called display, and whenever this function is called, it is going to print this for us. So the model and the year that is assigned to the attributes of the car class. So it is going to basically print the two attributes of the car class. So here I am creating an instance of the car class. So this is the first instance called C1 being created from the car class. Okay, it's an instance of the car class. So we are writing down the name of the class, which is car, and then C1, the name of the instance or object that we're creating from this class. And also here on the right hand side, we need to write down new car, meaning that we are creating a new instance from the car class. Okay, so this is based on the instance of the car class. So whenever we are creating an instance of the car class like this with nothing inside parentheses, it means that we are dealing with the constructor that is default version, because there is no parameter inside the parentheses. Okay. However, if we would like to create an instance of the car class and call this constructor, we need to have one string and one integer inside the parentheses, which is the case here. So I have the string Toyota and the integer 2022 as my parameters inside the parentheses. So I create a new instance or object of the car class called C2. And this object, when it is created, it has two parameters, Toyota and 2022. Okay. Now it is going to automatically call the parameterized constructor, which requires these two parameters. Okay. And M is the Toyota, it's the string. Y is the 2022. So M is going to be assigned to the model attribute and Y is going to be assigned to the year attribute of the class, these two attributes of the class. Okay. So we created two instances. The first one is going to automatically call the default constructor because there is no parameter inside the parentheses. And the second one is going to call the parameterized constructor because we're having two parameters inside the parentheses. Okay. So using the first instance or object from the car class, I call the display function. And using the second object, I also again call the display function. So when I run this code, we see two different results in the output, although we are dealing with one class. So the first part is printing unknown and 0, but the second line is printing Toyota and 2022. So why do you think these are the results of the same class? So basically, when we are using the first object to call the display function, the display function is going to print the model and the year attribute of the class. Okay, and because we created an instance here for the default parameter and the default for the default constructor, and the default constructor basically is automatically called when that instance is created, and these two values, meaning unknown and 0, are assigned to model and year respectively. Okay, so when I use the same instance to call the display function, it is printing model and year, so therefore unknown and 0, both of them are being printed in the output. However, when we create the second instance here with two parameters, it is going to automatically call the parameterized constructor because this is the only constructor that requires two parameters, and one of them is a string, the other one is integer. Therefore, this M and Y, both of them are going to be assigned to model and year attributes, okay, which are Toyota and 2022. So when I call the display function using the C2 instance, it is going to print the model and year, of which are Toyota and 2022. So in this video, we learned about constructors. We learned that the constructors have the same name as the class name, okay? And whenever we are creating an object of the class, by default, these constructors are going to be automatically ran and assign certain values to the attributes of our class. And here we were dealing with two different constructors, like we defined a default constructor and one parameterized constructor. So when we are creating an instance that has no parameter, it is going to automatically call this default constructor because this is the constructor that requires no parameter. And these two values are assigned to the attributes of the class. However, when we are having another object being created and we have already a parameterized constructor, it means that when we are creating an instance, we need to, and we want to use this constructor, we want this constructor to be ran automatically, we need to have two parameters, like a string and an integer. Therefore, it is going to assign these two values as the attributes of our class, and using these two objects, we learned how to call the display function, which is inside the class. So it's not possible to access this display function without using the instance or objects of the class. We need to have an object of the class first, and then we need to have the call of this function. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, what's up? In today's video, we're going to learn about this using the this keyword in Java. So here I have a class called main, and it has two variables, name and age. So the first one is from string data type, and the second one, age, is from the integer data type, okay? And we are having a constructor here. How do I know that it's a constructor? Because the name of it is the same as the name of the class. So this constructor also has two variables, and the name of these variables are name and age respectively, that they are similar to the ones of the class attributes, okay? In this case, because we want to make sure that we're not the compiler understands which name variable and which age variable we're talking about, we need to use the this keyword, meaning that, for example, whenever an instance of this class is created, the constructor is going to be automatically implemented, and it is going to assign these two variables to the attributes of the class. Okay, but they are having the same name. How the compiler would not mix it? So this is the solution. This name on the right hand side is for the constructor, the parameter that is passed when we were creating the instance. Also, this age on the right hand side has the same situation. But this name on the left hand side is the attributes of the class. This is why we use this keyword to let the compiler knows that this is the name for the class attributes. And again, for the age here also we are having this age. So the compiler would understand that on the right hand side we are assigning the value that is passed to the constructor when we were creating the instance. And on the left hand side we are having the this age, meaning that, okay, that right hand side value is going to be assigned to the attribute of the class which has the name age as well. Okay, this might sound a little bit abstract. I will give you an example, you will understand in a couple of minutes. So we are having a function called display in the main class, and it's a void type, meaning that it is not going to return anything for us. Whenever this display function is called, it is going to execute these two lines. So it is going to print the name and it is going to print the age. Again, we are using this keyword, meaning that, okay, be aware, we are telling the compiler, be aware that I want to print the attributes of the class, okay, this name and this age, and not these two. Okay, so here I am creating two objects, or let's say two instances of the main class. Okay, so the first one is called P1, the second one is P2. Because this main class, the name of the class is main with capital M, has a constructor, and this constructor has two parameters here. We see that this constructor has two parameters, one string and one integer. The variable names are a name and age. So because the constructor has two parameters in the parentheses, whenever we're creating an object of this class, we must have two parameters. Okay, so I will say it one more time. The class has a constructor, and this is the class. Okay, this is the start of the class. So this is the constructor. How do I know that it's a constructor? Because it has the same name as the class name. Because the constructor has two parameters in the parentheses, when I create an instance of this class, I must have two parameters as well, because whenever I create that object or that instance of the class, the constructor is going to be automatically called. Okay, so in order for it to be called, it requires two parameters, and these are the parameters, one string and one integer. So I create the P1 instance or object of the main class, and there are two parameters inside parentheses. The first one is a string, the second one is an integer, so Alice and 25. Then here I create the second object of the main class. I have Bob and the age 30. Okay, so when the constructor for the P1 is called automatically, it is basically going to assign Alice and 25. This is Alice and this is 25 to the attributes of the class, which is this name. Okay, and also this age. Okay, this age. So Alice and 25 on the right hand side are assigned to this name and this age, which are the attributes of the class. Okay, so these two are on the right hand side here and being assigned to these two that are the attributes of the class. Okay, again, the same thing goes for the P2. Whenever we create this object, the constructor is automatically called, and Bob and 30, both of them are assigned to the attributes of the class. Then I use the same objects, so P1 and P2, to call the display function. So the display function, whenever it is called, it is going to execute these two lines. It is basically going to print the name of the class attribute that is stored using that specific object and its age. So I call the display function using the first object, and it is going to print me this part. Name Alice, age 25. So name and age, these are the messages that are printed. And this name and this age is going to help us to, it is going to help the compiler actually to access the values that are stored in these two class attributes through P1, okay, through P1, okay, and P1 was storing Alice and 25, so Alice and 25, they're both being printed in the output. And also I use the P2 to call the display function. Again, the same logic happens. Bob and 30, they were stored in the attributes of the class using the P2 object. So when I use the P2 object and call the display function, it is going to print Bob and 30 for me in the output. Okay. So in this video, we learned about classes and constructors with parameters in Java. We learned how to define a function in a class in Java. We learned how to declare and initialize an instance or object of a class, how to access a function inside a class, and also, more importantly, we learned about the this keyword that is going to help the compiler to know which variable we are talking about when the variable, the attributes of the class, their names are the same as the parameters of the constructor. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody and welcome to this video. In today's video, we are going to learn methods inside a class, or let's say functions inside a class in Java. So here is my class called calculator. I use the class keyword to declare this class, and the name of my class is calculator. Inside this class, I have two functions. So this is the first function called add function. This is the second function called multiply function. So this add function is of integer data type, meaning that it is going to return an integer for us. It requires two parameters that are both integers, a and b. So whenever we call this add function, we need to have two parameters. Okay, we need to pass two parameters. Basically, this function is going to return a plus b. Okay, the output of a plus b is going to be returned by this function. Here we are having another function called multiply. It has two parameters as well, int a and int b. Both of them are integer, and it is going to return an integer for us, and it is going to return a multiplied by b. So whenever we call this function, firstly we need to have two parameters to pass, and it is going to calculate a multiplied by b for us. So now we are having the main function here. So here, first of all, I create an object called cal from the calculator class. Okay, so this is how I create an object. Then I use that object to call the functions that are inside the calculator class. So I call the add and multiply functions here. And when I call this function, I need to have the parameters. So two integers need to be passed. 3 and 4 are passed for the add function using the cal object, which is an object of the calculator class. And also here 3 and 4 again are passed when we are calling the multiply function using the object that we just created for the calculator class. And all of these are inside the system out println because we would like to see the result in the output. So when I run this code, we see that sum, this message is being shown here, sum, and number 7 is being shown here as well. So this number 7 comes from where? So when we use that object to call the add function, because the add function is inside the calculator class, we can only call it through an object of the class. This is why actually we initially create an object of that class. So I need to have an object of that class to call the add function, and I pass these two numbers. So 3 and 4 are passed here, and this function add is going to execute this part, a plus b, meaning that 3 plus 4 the output is 7. So 7, it is going to return 7. So therefore, it is going to print 7 because this number 7 is inside the system out println function. So this number 7 is being printed in the output here. And here we are having the multiply function, and 3 and 4 are passed as parameters. And we see that here we are having the number 3 multiplied by 4. So the output is 12. It is going to return 12, and 12 is being returned here. And because 12 is inside this function, it is going to print product, which is here, and number 12 is being printed in the output. So when I call the function with another number, so what if I call the function with number 5 and number 10, and here with number 6 and number 3, and I run the code one more time. So when I run the code, I expect that the values will change. So now I call the add function with number 5 and 10. So this add function is going to calculate 5 plus 10, which is 15, which is here again. And now the multiply function is called by number 6 and 3. It is going to multiply 6 by 3, which is 18, and 18 is being printed in the output. So in this video, we learned how to declare functions inside a class, how to create an object of that class to access the functions that are inside that class. Thanks for watching.